following preview was begrudgingly approved for all audiences.
You're listening to Elevator Music.
Welcome back to Forward Thinking, presented by the Professional Collegiate League. I'm Ricky Volante, and I'll be joined by my co-host, David West. As usual, we'll be welcoming guests challenging the status quo, doing social good, and bringing about positive change to the world, while also talking a little bit of sports. In this episode, we'll be joined by two special guests, starting off with former NBA player Chris Copeland, and followed by sport and entertainment attorney Kelsey Trainor. Cope will be discussing his career and the obstacles he had to overcome during his time overseas in the D-League and in the NBA. And with Kelsey, we'll be talking about the U.S. Women's National Team lawsuit, the WNBA Draft and recently signed collective bargaining agreement, as well as some of the legal implications in college sports and bringing college athletes back onto campus during the pandemic. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. You can also get more information at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to Forward Thinking. We're back with our special guest, Chris Copeland, a former teammate of mine, NBA veteran, general professional basketball player, general professional person in real life. Cope, thanks for joining Forward Thinking.
Appreciate you for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely. I want to start by introducing you to our audience, man. So give us a little bit about your background and, your basketball journey a little bit. So, for our fans.
I'll start off with high school in Virginia, Hermitage Panthers in Richmond, Virginia. I'll give you a fast version of the story. Then went to Colorado, go Buffs, University of Colorado. Spent a lot of time, my basketball journey, I wasn't one of those guys that made it to the league, getting drafted and whatnot. I had a lot more bumpier path. I had to go, I spent some time in the D-League, went overseas. It took a long time for me to actually make it. And I played my rookie season after years overseas with the Knicks. And then I became teammates with Dave with the Pacers. And then after that, I was with the Bucks. So
right.
Then more years overseas. So I've been around the different sides of the game, whether it be NBA, overseas, Europe, college. It's been a fun journey, and I've had a lot of great experiences from it.
Right. What were your feelings while you were in school? I think let's go back. I guess I would say that transition from high school to college. What was that like for you? You said you from Virginia but went to school in Colorado. Not similar places. So how was that transition?
For sure, big change. And originally born in New Jersey.
Okay, right. That's right.
I went to high school in Virginia, but I feel like Virginia is when my real basketball journey started, when I got to Hermitage. For me, it was a drastic change going from Virginia to the mountains in Colorado. The weather was different for one, and now you're starting to see the business of basketball once you get to college. You get to feel the pressures that come with being a scholarship athlete. And for me, it was a drastic life change, but it helped prepare me for being more serious about the game going forward in life, which would carry me on to having some success as a professional.
Right. What did you feel about, the way that you had to sort of create yourself in terms of a professional career? So most guys are dreaming about getting drafted and going that path. What were your sort of thoughts about sort of taking an alternative path to eventually become an NBA player?
I love to shout my mom's out. And since a youngin', she always preached, find a way to make a way. And when it started, when you're in college, you had the dreams of getting drafted and walking on that stage and whatnot. But you can feel it. If you're on the board high and if the chances are realistic. So it started to, as far as the way that you would normally go, I had to find a new one.
Right.
And going overseas just kind of for me was another way to keep the dream alive and keep pushing and try to improve my game so I could get to the level where I could compete in the NBA. And, it took a lot of work, a lot of training. I had to learn how to revamp not only my skills, but my approach to the game as far as, from watching game tape and learning how to attack the right way. It was very green.
Right.
I had to learn how to be the best I could be overseas, and I came to the NBA. I did all right.
Right. What would you say to a young kid who may be looking at an alternative path, right? So he's not looking at the traditional way to quote unquote make it. What would be your advice to a kid who may not, may feel like if he doesn't take the traditional path, then that's not a road that he wants to travel. So what would you say to a young kid sort of on that fence right now?
Great question. For me, I like to be honest and say that it's tough. And when I say tough, it's an understatement. Like it's not everybody makes it
right
to the NBA. That the percentages are what they are. You know what I mean? It's very hard to make it there. So one, have a real plan. I always want to have. I didn't, to be honest with you. Like it was like NBA or bust, and you have to train that way. But I hate to tell everybody that you work hard, you're gonna make it. Like, no, there's a lot of people that work their butt off and deserve the opportunity, but didn't happen. You know what I mean? So be realistic and have other options. Take education seriously. I like to tell the youngins that take the education seriously. Have a plan just in case, man. It doesn't mean you don't work as hard. It doesn't mean you don't believe in yourself. But I'm one that, I snuck through the cracks. But as a guy, I was just as easily as not seen a lot of my peers not, if you're going to continue a path, if the NBA isn't that, you can still have a great career overseas. You can still use your college education to do big things in life. And, the game of basketball is awesome to play and all of that, but it does stop for all of us, Beat it. So for me, again, have a realistic plan for your life alongside the goal of basketball.
A common theme or piece of advice that we've gotten from some of the other former players we've talked to and people that have worked on the front office side is understanding how to carve out a role for yourself, buying into organizational culture, and just knowing who you are and being true to yourself. And that's something I remember most about your career was how well you were able to do that, especially when you were with the Knicks. So in terms of, again, giving advice to young players, how important is it to really understand your role within a team and within the organization if you're lucky enough to make it to the professional level?
Oh, super important. I had a coach who said it, but he said, know what's you and what's not you. It's very important because, I don't want to say names, but you can imagine a center of my generation type center. These new centers, they're doing all kind of stuff. But, a center bringing the ball up and being a point guard. You know what I mean? Or a point guard trying to play a 5 position just to be very simple, keep everything simple. Both of them probably very good at whatever they do. They try to get out of themselves, it probably won't be as successful. Right. So it's very important to know what you do well, what you bring to the table. Once you establish, okay, who am I? Where am I at my best? Am I best shooting the ball? Am I best driving the ball? Am I best as a defender or rebounder? Whatever it is, you maximize that ability. And that's, I talked to JJ when I don't even know if he remembers this conversation, but JJ Barea a long time ago. I asked him, I was in the D League, he had got dropped down. And I asked him, I was like, what's the difference between, NBA and all the other levels? And he was like, these guys are professionals at what they do. If you're a shooter, that's what you're perfecting. They're perfectionists at whatever their craft is. So, like you say, carving out your role obviously starts with knowing yourself, knowing exactly what you do well, and perfecting that craft. Obviously, working on all facets of the game. But if you're a leaper, be a leaper. If you're a rebounder, whatever it is that you do, just perfect that.
How important is confidence? In that, because what I think it requires, and again, I didn't have the same path that you had, but how important is like knowing who you are, but then also having the confidence in yourself. So I think, you were one of those guys, when you came in the league, you were part of that, spread, you shooting the 3, right? Playing the majority of the game away from the basket. And to be honest, I mean, there was only a couple guys who were doing, playing like you, right? Playing that spread position. The Knicks were at the time were kind of playing with the small ball concept, right? So how important is it for you to maintain your confidence in all of it? Like even when you may be in a situation where, okay, you wanted to get drafted, you didn't get drafted. You're in the D League when you don't want to be in the D League, but you're fighting toward, taking another step. You get to the NBA and you're learning, ways to be successful. But how important is ultimately that confidence, in yourself and in that belief?
It's they say the game is 90% mental. It's higher.
Right.
You know, it is what it is. It's a mind game for sure.
Right.
If you don't come with the right approach mentally every game. I think there's an old saying. I'm definitely gonna butcher this statement, but if you think you can or you think you can't, you're usually right. Either way. And I believe that to be factual. Like if you can't possibly put your best foot forward without the utmost confidence. You'll pull back. You won't deliver the way you're supposed to. It's impossible. So you have to have that utmost confidence. You have to have that alpha, that killer mentality when you go out to the floor to play against guys who are playing with their utmost confidence and want to kill you.
Right.
And it has to be. It can be shaken. Like I mean, let's be honest. All of us have had our off days and string of bad games. And usually that's a mental thing.
Mm-hmm.
To the best of us, but it's very important the faster you can get back on track to that strong mental place. And it's different ways for different people, but you got to figure out your way to be mentally strong and get back to that place where your level. That can lead to success in basketball for sure.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that, it's a super small percentage of guys that reach the NBA ultimately. And that number's, well reported on, but I think a lot of times it goes overlooked how many players ultimately play professionally when you consider overseas and the D League and other options like that. What was your experience like? You played in a couple of different countries in Europe. What was your experience like over there, just so that, we're trying to allow younger players to understand and realize that professional basketball is more than just the NBA?
Yeah, and there are more opportunities for sure overseas. But look, I'm going to put it like this. Like, to be a professional athlete, I'll be honest, like there's some parts of overseas that are harder than the NBA, just the life. You know what I mean? I think depending upon what country you go, you've heard horror stories of guys not getting paid. You got heard of the language barrier. You can go down. It's a different game. It's the same game, but it's very different style of play. And some guys can't take being away from home and being away from everything they know. When you're up, everybody sleep. That's it's a totally different vibe over there. So wherever you end up, it's going to be a challenge. That's why we talk about how important it is to be mentally strong. To be in this game. Like Dave just asked, yes, there are opportunities and there's always ways to keep pushing and going forward, but you have to train your brain to be ready for whatever comes. You know what I mean? No matter what situation, it may not be NBA, you may not get drafted, you may stumble overseas, like I stumbled overseas early. Whatever it is, you have to be able to keep weathering that storm. Mental toughness is key for basketball player.
We've been having these conversations about mental health and wellness the last couple of weeks, and how important is that aspect of the game in your opinion? Because we're from the generation where it was you're seen as soft and it was taboo to talk about it, and we understand, like you said, we've all dealt with certain things in the game, but how important do you think that is now? And if you were a 15 to 20-year-old kid, what would you be thinking about in terms of addressing, your mental health and how important that is to the development of the athlete?
I mean, the brain is a muscle too, right? So you think about the old timers before our time, right? And they talk about how they used to train, how they used to do different things, and the mistakes that they made. Our old heads will tell us. And what happens is over time they start realizing the mistakes of the past. You know what I mean? And you're talking about how we treated it. And our generation was not. We weren't talking about mental health. I'm sorry.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's a part of the game that needs to be trained properly. And I think that could be anything from having the right teammates around you that pick you up to actually speaking to, medical professionals that can help different. You know what I mean? If you're having mental issues, because it's, especially in the NBA level, it's a lot.
Right, it's a lot. Right.
It's I couldn't even go into words the experience of what it is to be in the NBA. It damages people. We've seen those stories.
Right.
Without the proper care of your brain, it can do some serious damage to you outside of basketball, and that's what life is. Life is really majority outside of basketball. You got to be able to, carry what happens to you, the pressures, everything that comes with the game. You got to be able to carry that and go forward and continue to work well.
Right. Right.
So not to talk too much about it, but I think it's an underrated part of the game that we're still learning. You know what I mean? That's why in comparison to old times, like we're learning how to train better as athletes. We need to learn to train our minds as well.
when we had Andre Iguodala, he mentioned the importance of having other interests outside of basketball. Because like even when you account for practice time, travel time, your games, whatever media appearances you might have to do, there's still a lot of hours left in the day. And so in your personal experience, how important was it for you to have other interests, and how did those have a positive impact on you as a person and as a basketball player?
Well, I think that's important because you find your passion, right? And I think outside of basketball, most basketball players, basketball is their first passion. But when you find your other passions, you get to figure out what you really like, and you're gonna have to carve out a life outside of basketball. You know what I mean? So it's important that guys realize what they enjoy, whether it be some people really enjoy watching stocks or something.
Right.
They may enjoy, other forms of competition. They may enjoy speaking, public speaking. They may enjoy telling their story. For example, there's different things that you want to get into outside of basketball. I think, I'm not one that says go play video games all day. You know what I mean? I'm not one that because unless you're gonna be Ninja or somebody like that. I don't necessarily. I just don't see it. Maybe that's because I'm older. But I think guys should pursue other passions that can lead to a life outside of basketball. I think all that's important. But whatever it is that keeps you sane, should do it.
Right. And balance is right. It's a part of balance, right? So you can't. I learned that to avoid burning out, you want to be able to have a release in other places. You know what I'm saying? You want to be able to potentially put your focus and your energy, if it's only for a moment. Like I know you do music. I used to dabble in music some, so that was a place where you could go and escape the pressures of the world. How important do you think overall human development is for athletes? I think sometimes we get into this space where people just want us to be ball players. So how important is that? And at what stage should you start addressing, the other parts of yourself? Because you don't want kids at 15, 16 who haven't necessarily carved out a career for themselves, to be thinking about, I just don't know if a kid can carve out a career in sports if he's thinking about carving out a career in something else before he gets there, right? So, yeah, where do you feel like that sweet spot is? Like, when should a guy start thinking about evolving and developing the other parts of himself?
I mean, I was just saying this to one of my guys yesterday. It's tough because you can't tell for that, and I know what you're saying, because if you don't put your whole heart and soul into training basketball, you lower your chances, right? So who's to say that kid won't get injured, or and what's the next play? So you have to have that balance where everybody's story is different. You know what I mean? And I mean, the point is the kids these days should be aware of other options, right? Should always in the back of their mind. Should always train like this is your last option, last resort. Plan B should be to make Plan A work for sure, right? But Plan C and D, you know what I mean? You should have a Plan C
right.
on the totem pole that you should have, in the sense that, okay, regardless of basketball, like you say, why is human development so important?
Yeah,
I mean, it's key because regardless if you LeBron, if you got 20 years in the league, whoever, pick your favorite player, it's over at some point. LeBron's basketball will stop, and what is he doing already? He's playing into business world, right? So for me, I feel like it's super important for that. The human development part is super important because regardless of what type of career you may have, you're gonna have to do something else. You know what I mean? Or you don't want to. If basketball is all you offer to this world, that's fine. I mean, that's your story. But we all know that all the intangibles that come with being a basketball player, we have a lot more to offer because of our discipline, because of our work ethic. If we pick any craft and we apply those same principles, we can be equally as successful. You know what I mean? Right. So, just being able to change that mindset as not to being more than an athlete is so important because we have so much more to offer.
Obviously, being the only non-former NBA player on the call, it feels like, there's a window of time where at some point people forget your name. So you start to lose that relevance. So it's important to capitalize when you have the platform and the opportunity to start preparing for life next, because odds are you're going to be living life longer not playing basketball than you will be playing basketball. Hopefully you're healthy and everything.
Right.
So
Coach, I've got two, the first question is a fail up moment. So there's always a moment in I feel like particularly in NBA NBA guy's journey where you failed, but it catapulted you forward. You know, for me, it was in high school when I flunked out as a senior, one of the hardest periods of my life, but it just put me on the right track after that moment. And so where was that in your basketball journey?
My European experience.
Okay.
Or just not being drafted. Like that whole road, for me, it was a few different things. The long story short of it, I got cut a few times my first season overseas. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
I was challenging this twice. I got cut twice and left Spain to go to Holland, which is one of the smallest countries in basketball and probably in the world. But from Holland, I was able to build back. It catapulted me because after Holland, I got an opportunity to play for a coach named Yves Dufresne. He changed my mindset and changed my way of working, changed my approach to the game altogether. He used to say, you know, success is not a destination, it's a journey.
Right.
So for me, it's like, you know, I had to change all my habits. You know what I mean? And I think that I was basically like to me training camp for 2 years under him, and that catapulted the way I would train, the way I approached the game. And then next thing you know, I went to Belgium and I was carrying those same habits and putting up, you know, ridiculous numbers. And then I ended up in the NBA. So I would think just my journey overseas, getting cut, getting my butt kicked a bunch of times, but learning that it's not over and continuing to fight. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's important to get hit in the face just so you know, like, oh, okay, I hate that. I'm still here. I'm breathing. We're still in the fight. Sometimes it's important to get your butt kicked so you know that you're still standing. You know what I mean? And so once I learned that, okay, these things keep happening to me, but I'm still in the fight. Now I'm coming. You know what I mean? And I think that's what catapulted me forward, just knowing I could weather those storms.
Yeah, that's important. You said something there when you said the coach helped you change. You said he helped you change your habits or fix your habits. What was that process? What does that mean? Like for an athlete, like what does that mean?
Well, he used to scream at me. He was red in the face, man. I got some pictures of it. I got but you know everything, bro. Like he literally would. I don't know if he had people watching me or something, but like that's back when Facebook, and he would be like, we saw a comment on something, or like it was something, but he knew I had interacted with somebody in the States, because you know when you overseas, you're trying to keep your friendships and man. But I'm going to practice. You got practice in 4 hours. He's telling me you got practice in 4 hours. What you talking to people for? How can you possibly play well without sleep? How is that possible? He said to me like that. And then like other things, like I would have, you know me, I've always been a scorer, so I would have like, 22 or something like that, and I feel good. He would be like, bro, like, yeah, you had 22, we won the game, cool, but yeah, the guy going against you, he had 17. So you haven't dominated. Like you can dominate. You can actually make it. You need to be putting so much. You should have 30 and he should have 10. Like he should be. You should be attacking him every time. And on the other end, it's just different. And I'm talking like I would come out feeling good.
Right.
Oh no, every day. And I would be just, you know what I mean. So it was old bad habits. You know what I mean.
Right.
The league, I was just trying to kill everything. You know what I mean. And
right.
After those years, it was a lot of stuff. Food. I mean, I've never been great with food, but like it was better. I got better under him.
Right.
Different things, how to train, all different types of stuff.
Yeah, and that I mean, you got to respect that, because I mean that for the folks who haven't had coaches, I mean, what Cope was explaining is, sounds like somebody who just cared, right? He cared about the outcomes that you were gonna, experience, and so that's always good, because again, you've had, for every good one, you get a couple bad ones. So that sounds like that sounds like an experience. But again, it sounds like you were able to maintain because of your belief in what you are, your confidence. The last question I have for you, Cope, is real light. Again, it's another question about routine. So what is it that you do in the morning that sets you apart and get your day started? The first thing you do. I feel like successful people who have experienced or achieve a certain level of success, have regimens and have routines. So what is it that you do in the morning?
Or like these days?
Right now. Like when you wake up, like what do you do in the morning to get your day started?
Do is check my calendar. So like what I think, and I don't feel like I've separated myself from, the business pack yet, but I'm on my way. What I do that does help me separate myself is that I document and write down everything. Like, so my phone, when I say check my calendar, I have everything in their notes from reach out to this person. You know, it keeps keeps me on track. So I have like kind of an idea of what the outline of what I should be doing that day or that week or whatnot. So the first thing I do is check my calendar, like what's on the agenda. So it gets my mind ready for, and not, I won't forget anything that I have to accomplish, whether it be meetings or something I have to do myself for the things that I'm creating. I have to make sure I have those. I take a lot of notes and I put them in my calendar. Like, that's staying organized, I think, is important.
Yeah, one more. What are you most looking forward to doing post-quarantine?
That's a good one. The most important, what I'm most looking forward to, look, I don't know, but I'm hoping that people will be all right and go outside. Disappear, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm.
Right.
I'm afraid, this whole quarantine thing. I'm afraid that, we should all obviously it's a new world. We should obviously take precaution and move accordingly with the new information we have with what's going on in the world. Okay, yeah. But at some point we gotta be like smart, the smart way, right?
Right.
Be cognizant, wear the mask, do the things you're supposed to do. But I hope people don't stay inside. And I've talked to a lot of friends that even when they tell you go outside again, a lot of people do not want to be outside at all.
Right.
And that scares me if the majority of the world is like scared to live. Like, what type of world is that? You know what I mean? So I'm excited I'm hopeful for that people will learn new ways to be outside, but still interact and still continue to chase their dreams, chase success, and build this world back to what it was.
This was great. Really appreciate the time, Chris.
Thanks, Cope. Appreciate you.
Good.
And welcome back to Forward Thinking. We're now joined by another special guest, in-house counsel at Abrams Media, Kelsey Trainor. Kelsey, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks guys for having me.
We'd like to start it off with all of our guests. Introduce yourself to the audience, tell us what you've done and your background a little bit.
Yeah, Kelsey Trainor. I work for a media company run by Dan Abrams from ABC News. I practiced law for a bit in Philadelphia. Go Birds. And I got a call one day from a friend of mine who was a producer on the television show Blue Bloods. And he called me up and he was like, why don't you come work for me? Like, totally out of the blue. And so I ended up, I went from being a lawyer and having an assistant to being the assistant to the executive producer of a television show. I moved to New York, worked in production and worked for that show for a bit, met some cool people and did some work in production and, television. And then went to a talent agency for a little bit and found a job on LinkedIn for Abrams Media. And they ended up needing, it was for business affairs. And I go in and they're just like, you're a lawyer? Great. So ended up working for them. And, it's cool because they have a bunch of different platforms, websites, 24/7 network, book publishing. So you kind of get a bit of everything there and, get to be a little bit creative but also still, utilize that law degree because it costs a lot of money.
So this is the first time we've had a fellow attorney joining us on one of these shows. When you went into law school, and obviously you're a former athlete, you've been around sports pretty much your entire life. Was this something that you expected or hoped to eventually get into, or was it just a matter of kind of falling into it?
No, I always like to tell stories. I think that's people see things on TV and film, and if it's something that they feel or that they can relate to, it makes people feel less alone. It makes people feel like there's other people out there going through the same stuff. So I always love the storytelling aspect of entertainment, but I'm not an actor. I can't read a script for this or for that. So, was never really in my wheelhouse, but just knew the people in the industry who were doing the stuff behind the scenes, the prop people, the writers, and just kind of clung to that and made friends with a lot of those people. And at the end of the day, having a law degree helps because everyone in the industry wants something from you a little bit. So you get a lot of phone calls saying, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? But yeah, and even what you're talking about, like nothing I said has even related to sports yet, because then, I end up writing for Dan Abrams has a site called Mediate where we just approached him one day and wanted to start a podcast on sports. And it's kind of hard to monetize those, as we all know. So we started writing along with it. And that's how maybe a little bit over a year ago, I started getting into the sports world, the media side of it, which is totally unrelated to my day job at all. And, anything else that I do.
Getting into sports in terms of what you've written about, what you've covered, big follower of what you put out there. I've noticed always that you're one of, I think, the important critics around the coverage or lack thereof of women's sports, in particular the WNBA and women's college sports. So if you could go into a little bit about that side of things, that lack of coverage, how that impacts the growth of the game, the investment in the game, and potentially stunts its growth to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I always use the analogy of a 400-meter race in terms of women's sports. Nobody sits and thinks of a 400-meter race and thinks that everybody should start at the same point because the track is not even. It wouldn't be fair. So you don't hear anybody out there screaming like, oh, the person in the outside lane should be starting at the same point as the person in the inside lane. And to me, that's where the coverage and the investments of women's sports comes in, is that there needs to be this concerted effort to cover women's sports. When you think about the fact that we needed a federal law, we needed Title IX, only 37 words long, to ensure that colleges across the country even had women's sports. And even after that, some of the colleges didn't even have them until a few years after. So when you think about that, the lack of investment in coverage, there's an aspect of it. It's just not fair. And we need to make a concerted effort to have more coverage, to have more investment. Men's sports are hundreds of years ahead in terms of all of those things. And how can you measure success when you don't have those opportunities? And so, just from a standpoint of being a female athlete, I used to coach college basketball. It's just something, it's like you want to see people have opportunities. You see in the media world, you see who the executives are and who's running the news and who's the head of all the, the sports media companies. Like, it's men. And so you have that aspect of it. And what do people cover? They cover what they know. And so, I think all around, it's just, I'm a big advocate of making a effort to make sure that the women's game is covered. And it's just also, I think we're doing a disservice to people that, don't watch it. Like, these women are out there, they're just crushing it. And the only people who are disrespecting the women's game are, Joe Schmo in their basement. You've got LeBron, you've got Katie, you got Steph, all these people out there, they're like, yo, these women are dope because they know the effort it takes to be an elite athlete. And these women are elite athletes. So I think we just need to catch up with coverage and investment.
Right. So where's that line for the investment, for the, I guess, the interest? So covering women's sports, you feel is the best way to garner interest. Where do you draw that line where you say, okay, we've got to get people interested in the sport to support the sport beyond just, the words and maybe even just the writing. So how do you get that real infrastructure in place to invest in women's sports and create that groundswell of interest?
It takes somebody. It takes somebody in a position of power to do it. But when you look at, I use an example of European soccer, right, in the United States. Women's soccer is in the United States is the it thing, right? Because you had the 99ers, Julie Foudy, Mia Hamm. You had all those women who sat on that stage and in the United States won, the World Cup, and that's kind of, and also they just keep winning, and the men don't. But across the world, men's soccer is gold. It's probably the most profitable sport that there is. Right. So when you look at the coverage, I think it's either Fox or ESPN, right? They've made an effort to have Saturday and Sunday mornings be these European soccer leagues. Okay, they have these contracts where they're covering these games. And to start, we didn't have the viewership. Now it's a thing. Now people are waking up in the United States on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and they are watching European soccer. Right. And that took somebody thinking, this is a product that's worth it. Obviously, globally, it's worth it because soccer is one of the most popular sports in the world. And how do we make it more popular in America? We have to show it. It has to be visible. If it's not in front of you, you're not going to think about it. Out of sight, out of mind. So it does take somebody with the kind of the progressive thinking of, let's put this product out there. Because when it's out there, it sells. Look at the U.S. women's national team. They're generating more money than the men now. So
yeah, I think it literally took a global pandemic for the WNBA draft to get covered.
Right. And it was the best draft in I forget the report, but it was the top rated draft in however many years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yet the NFL, on the flip side of it, gets a 24-hour dedicated coverage on ESPN for the release of their schedules.
Right. Not only that, but like the original draft, like when they released it, it was supposed to be on ESPN too. There's no sports out there. There's no sports on, but we're not going to put the draft, the WNBA draft, on ESPN. Why? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And then, so, you had that call out. You had, Kathy Engelbert. I'm a big fan of what she does, and her business mind is so smart. But come on, like, what else are you're airing cornhole, and what else are you airing on ESPN that you can't cover the WNBA draft with Sabrina Ionescu, who every single male, female athlete is out there giving, respect and props to, and all the other players, Kennedy Carter, etc. I mean,
agreed. Now, in terms of that groundswell though, that David was talking about, I feel like, again, you wrote about this, you covered it, the steps that the professional women's basketball players took in the most recent WNBA CBA. How much does that mean for the growth and coverage of the game?
It's huge. And, when you look at the collective bargaining agreement, maybe in a few years, the financial advances that they made won't mean as much. Like, maybe the numbers won't match up to inflation and all that stuff. But when you look at the things that they had, Skylar Diggins-Smith, she played an entire season pregnant because under the old collective bargaining agreement, they could have decided to only pay her 50% of her salary if she was pregnant, just because she's pregnant. And so they made a ton of steps in terms of having pregnancy benefits, things that specifically affect women, right? Women get pregnant, how are you going to have a collective bargaining agreement that doesn't really focus on elite female athletes and the needs that they have? And so, you've got higher salaries for the players, which is huge. You need money, and you have better travel conditions. Those things that express to somebody, hey, I value you and your talent. The fact that you have to travel to a game when you're, 6'7" in a airplane seat that doesn't fit you, like, you can't perform. Like, that, like, you can't do it. And so they made so many advances in those little ways that really are just, players' worth and their value. And what they did is they set up the future, the players long term. Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, these players, they kind of knew, like, not a lot of this stuff would really benefit them. But, over the next 5-10 years, these players, these young women are going to be able to play viably in the United States, or because, otherwise they got to go overseas, make, millions of dollars.
It reminds me a bit, David, of some of the stuff you've told me about with the, I think, 2011 lockout and that CBA negotiation that you guys went through in terms of some of the big steps you took that allowed for supermax contracts and things like that, and just grew the economics of the game.
Yeah, made it better. How do women get ownership? So I'm one of the people that I'm a basketball purist. So how do we create a game that's the women's game? So I think a lot of times people look at the women's game, again, the average fan, the non-basketball person, and they want to see what men do. So they equate basketball with simply what the guys do, right? Dunking and all the athleticism. But the women's game is a bit different because, I had a coach say this, a few years ago to me, like, if you take a team full of, or a gym full of 16-year-old girls and a gym full of 16-year-old boys, the girls are going to pick up the skill concepts at like a 4 or 5 time faster rate than the boys, right? Because their game is totally around skill, right? And the ability to actually have the basketball skills, right? The natural basketball ability, which I think is a strength of the women's game. So how do you get people to understand like that the women have they're playing basketball, but from an internal perspective, like, it's a different game, right? The game is a lot smarter, better shooters. They're more technically sound. And I think people overlook that part, right? Because they're looking for, well, she can't dunk. Well, it's just a different game. That's my take. Yes. So how do we bring people to that?
No, I totally agree with you. And, I've always said it, the women's game is much more fundamental. Now, maybe that doesn't excite people, right? But when you have the average athlete in the WNBA and into college now too, when you have them coming in now at 6'7", you have people
Right.
coming in taller, more athletic. And it's not because those people didn't exist before. It's not because a 6'7" woman didn't exist before, but people are gravitating towards sports now because there's opportunities in those sports.
Right.
And so, the game is different, and you have to market it differently.
Right.
I think Meg Rapinoe said that best. Like, I don't know why we're marketing these women's leagues as if the same as men's leagues.
Right.
They're not. They are different, but that doesn't mean one is better than the other, right? Like Meg Rapinoe out there and Tobin Heath, they're like doing razzle-dazzle stuff that is so entertaining that male, female, whatever, you're watching that, you're impressed. The same way with, you can't tell me that it's not exciting to watch Sue Bird, give it behind the back pass when she's running down there. She's what, 5'7"? I don't know.
Right.
With that. But it is. It's fun to watch and it's different, but you have to market it differently. And there's some women dunking a little bit.
Yeah. But like I said, from that lens of the fan, I think that's it's an issue I have with sports generally. With a lot of people who have people who have opinions, but they don't really understand the nature of the game itself. So I think the women's leagues particularly often get like they bear the brunt of, well, the men's game is exciting because there's dunks and these other things, but
and also you can take the men's game and you can look back at it over the past 100 years, and it was played a little bit like the women's game is now. When you look at some of these offenses that people run, the NBA now is like, very short shot clock. It's one-on-one. Like those are the moves. You get your nice alley-oops, you get your fast breaks. The women's games, you got full plays. You're running the Kansas offense, you're running the triangle offense. And it's you have to market it in a way that doesn't don't insult the fans, don't insult people's intelligence. If they can't figure that out.
Right. And I also would say, I think because of sports medicine. So when I was in college, 18 years ago, we had, I think, I never forget it, 4 women on the basketball team tear their ACLs, and then maybe 6 or 7 on the volleyball team tear their ACLs. And part of it was, they were saying, well, women are a bit behind in terms of the sports medicine. I think that gap has closed. If you look at some of these 15, 16-year-old girls that are playing now, you can tell that they've been educated about the importance of, taking care of their bodies, getting their legs stronger, because women are more susceptible to knee injuries. It's just a natural. But you look at the girls now and you're saying, wow, she is really working on her legs. And I think that's translated into those better athletes now, right? The 6'7" woman is not necessarily riddled with knee injuries and things like that. She's able to have a successful career. Another part, that I think that people often overlook is that the game is developing because the information, the science around it, the sports medicine involved is more specific to the women. It's not necessarily, get your ankles taped and go out there or whatever. It's sports specific for them. And I think it's helped their game immensely. And I think people just don't see that dynamic of it, right? There's a young girl now in high school. She's dunking. I mean, she's been dunking.
And you got Paige, what's her last name, that's going to UConn. You got her, right? This is a perfect example. She plays so fun, right? She's not out there dunking. But you watch her highlights, she's playing fun. And what did she also do? She built a brand around herself as a high school student. Because she marketed herself as having skill, talent, hard work, and she has a swagger about her.
A little nasty side,
Exactly. That's, to me, that's it. And she, like you said, I mean, you see her doing these things out there, kind of, running around with these trainers and all this stuff. And, she would crush me.
She's not right. She can play.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah. And so you touched a little bit on it already, but the recent USSF lawsuit, we don't get into the legal side as much as I would like to. But that said, we've already alluded to it, specifically some of the legal arguments that were made, around women being lesser than men from a skills perspective, from a physical perspective. That's now resulted in both the president and, as of this week, chief legal officer of USSF stepping down. Could you tell us a little bit about that? One, how did that happen? And two, the men's versus the women's game. Again, you've already alluded to it with Rapinoe, Tobin Heath, and some of the superstars now, as well as from the 99 team. Yeah,
I think the most important thing, right? Everyone knows about the U.S. Women's National Team equal pay lawsuit. And that's what people go around chanting, equal pay, equal pay, equal pay. That's not quite what it is. And they have this lawsuit that they filed, right before they went to the World Cup in March 2019. And it's not equal pay, equal pay. You have two different collective bargaining agreements. So that's what happened. The judge came down and he said, the men have this collective bargaining agreement. The women have this collective bargaining agreement. The men have bargained for kind of lower guarantees, lower pay overall around, but higher bonuses. And the women, because they don't have a league to fall back on, they don't have the same amount of money. They do have the league, the NWSL, but they don't have high salaries there. And so they bargained for, a higher base salary with less money guaranteed. So the big issue that out of this case was that under an Equal Pay Act claim, it's very hard to compare those two different pay structures of the collective bargaining agreement. And everyone's going around chanting equal pay, equal pay. It's just not quite what it is. But what people are not considering and not understanding is, when we go back to that analogy of the 400-meter track and the 400-meter race, is like, where did these women come in from a negotiating standpoint? A friend of mine said it best. She was like, if somebody else is in the parking lot and you're out there on first base, are you really starting from the same point negotiations wise? And so the women at some points, they were just negotiating. You go back to the 99ers, they were just trying to get even paid to come to training camps, and now, like we discussed before, now you actually have the U.S. women's national team generating more revenue than the men's national team. Can you name any players on the men's national team? You might be able to if you're a fan of soccer, but you could, Meg Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd, these people because the U.S. women's national team is U.S. soccer right now. And so the judge came down and basically was like, well, over this 4-year period, they actually made more money than men. Yeah, they did, because they had to win every single thing. They had to win 2 World Cups in that time, Olympics, and the men didn't have to do anything. They just had to exist.
Not even qualify for the World Cup.
Right. And they're still doing pretty well. So it's tough. I mean, I think everyone kind of expected this result from a legal standpoint, but if you really go into what actually matters, it's that these women, they don't have those point of value things that the WNBA has in their collective bargaining agreements. They're taking commercial flights. They're not on charter flights. And that matters, matters if you're sharing a room with 3 other people before the World Cup, or if you have your own room and you can relax and be expected to perform, up to par.
Yeah. Going back to representation. So I am a big soccer fan, first of all.
Right. Okay.
Secondly, thinking back to representation and the Nike agreement that's with the U.S. women's national team and the U.S. men's national team, something that I always noticed was, so again, now for those of you that aren't soccer fans, whenever you win a World Cup, you have your nation's crest, and then you get a star, and the number of stars you have represents the number of World Cups you've won. And so whenever Nike would release their U.S. national team gear, there would be no stars, which meant that it was gear prepared representing the men's team and not the women's team that had won multiple World Cups and is selling out games every off season or during these exhibition games.
Right.
And so I always thought that was one of the most frustrating things about it, that again, when you think U.S. national soccer, you think of the women's team first.
Yeah. And we go back to what can be done. They didn't even people couldn't even buy the jerseys with the 4 stars on it when they won. The same thing with Sabrina Ionescu's jersey. It sold out in under an hour when she was drafted. I actually think it's not good business to undervalue the women's game in any area right now. I think you're being a little bit unsavvy to not value it, and then
That's
to
a
not
good way
have
to put it,
products
yeah.
and stuff like there.
Right.
Might as well stop. An example came up. It was like, this person isn't a big enough name. No, you're not doing your job if you're not marketing something in a way to make it do well. And the product is there. So we just have to do a better job of making people see that.
I remember when they came to Cleveland right after, so it would have been after the Olympics, I think, and they had essentially the rematch of the gold medal game here. And again, they didn't even have personalized shirts. They had everything that was available for sale in the stadium was for the men's team and not for the women's team, even though the women's team was the one that was playing and that everybody had come to see. Because I wanted a Tobin Heath 17 shirt.
And like for anything, like for TV, for film, for advertisers, like that's your target market is women like 18 to 35, right? Like that's your target market of people that are going to buy stuff. So I don't know. It's dumb, to be quite honest, to not be selling to them. Doesn't make any sense. And or have the product there to make money.
Right. If you're going to have the team, you might as well have the product there too.
Yeah, might as well.
All right.
Jumping into college sports. So again, you've covered this, you've written about it extensively, the rights of college athletes and the progress towards giving them more rights that is ongoing. In terms of your legal, business, media perspective, how do you foresee where we're at with college sports and where we're going in a week where, again, as of like a couple of hours ago, the SEC has approved players to come back for voluntary camps in the midst of a pandemic?
Well, I think it's pretty telling when you have all of these articles coming out about how much money these colleges are going to lose and this and that. And that's why you have to bring sports back. You know, if the student part of the student athlete really mattered, you know, then they would just be playing intramural whenever they can get back to it. Like, right? If that's what really matters, they'd be going to college. They'd be, you know, the sport wouldn't matter. But the fact of the matter is it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And, you know, students are out there and they are putting in their health, their time for people who are making billions of dollars off of them. And in no other area of the world, of, you know, no other area of the law can you have somebody basically perform all that free labor and just profit off of them.
Right. What are colleges doing right now to protect themselves? Because I'm sure they have to protect themselves in this environment. So I've read this week some folks are rushed. They feel like they're being rushed back. The college players are being rushed back. Some NBA guys have sort of let that sentiment leak out. So what kind of protections are these universities putting in place? I mean, they would have to put. I know they have to put something in, but what would be your idea?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously trying to maneuver liability waivers, and we don't know how those would hold up in court, you know, given that anytime it goes to court, the NCAA have been found to violate, you know, federal antitrust law. I don't see why, you know, across the board, these waiver of liability things kind of wouldn't go the same way, but it's not just colleges that are doing that. A lot of businesses that are bringing people back are trying to figure out whether this will actually work, whether you can, you know, even waive the fact that if someone's calling you in to perform and do something, whether you can waive your risk of death, basically, you know. I mean, you could do that for like skydiving and stuff like that, but that's for fun, right? That's for fun, you know. And there's obviously an assumption of the risk in sports to an extent. You know, you go out there, you get injured, something happens to you. For the most part, you assume that risk. But for a global pandemic, we're not seeing it. So it's going to be interesting to see. You know, those are definitely one of the things that they're trying to figure out. You know. Yeah,
a couple of things I would throw out again that I've been seeing throughout the day. I'm forgetting now whether it was the athletic director or the president. I think it was the athletic director at UCF has called upon Congress to provide a college athletics bailout, essentially, for the money that's being lost here. And so you have that on one hand. On the other hand, you know, I feel like people have forgotten about this, but we're actually coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Jordan McNair. You know, his initial dehydration and the traumatic body injury that he suffered during, again, voluntary workouts that ultimately led to his death. You know, we're coming up on that, and we're about to enter a period again where athletes are being told it's voluntary. But I think, again, all three of us here were athletes in college. There's nothing voluntary.
Right.
Never.
And it also takes advantage of that athlete mentality. Is like, you want to win, you want to work hard, you want to put in everything you have. So, you know, any athlete wants to be out on the court no matter what, or out on the field. Like, that's what you want to do because you love the game. So you might be willing to do these things because you're a competitor, but not even fully understanding that you're putting your health and your future at risk. You know, the NCAA knows it. They fully realize it. but it also takes advantage of the athlete and the competitor in these athletes because we all want to play, I want to get back into my intramural league, but
Yeah. And again, just because I appreciate that you're our first attorney guest that we've had, the legal meaning of student athlete, I think oftentimes gets overlooked. People think that it's a term used by institutions to describe an athlete that plays intercollegiate athletics. But in reality, it has a significant legal meaning, which again, going back to your liability point, shifts that liability away from the NCAA, the institutions.
Yeah, and it shifts, it allows them to not have to treat them as employees. And that's, the major thing. And when you're an employee, the university has, hundreds of more obligations to you than you do as a quote unquote student athlete. And so, there's 1,000 things wrong with the NCAA and, what they're doing with student athletes. But, you take it, about 100 steps further when you're calling people to come back and play sports when like you can't even like attend like funerals or graduations or anything like this. Like, really? So that's important though? To them it is though, because it's $1 billion industry. So
right. I saw some mess about professors standing behind plexiglass at one of maybe Purdue or somebody like that was saying that was one of the measures that they were going to take. And it just sounds ridiculous to think about.
What are you paying for then? Like, what are you paying for? Can't you just do that online then?
Right.
Like, or take a year off and go out and work and then go back to college when you can actually get the university experience.
Right.
Like if I could do it all over again, I'd go to the cheapest state school or do whatever I could that was the least expensive and, get your education how you get it. So I don't know.
Yeah. And I think another layer here that's going on that might end up impacting college sports is also the call from the insurance industry to insulate from a congressional legislative standpoint, insurance companies from having to cover employees going back to work and potentially contracting the coronavirus. But what makes this unique again is, and this is why I wanted to bring up the term student athlete, is if these aren't employees, how gray is it? How gray is it in terms of these insurance policies that may or may not be covering these athletes?
Prior to living in New York, I actually represented the insurance commissioner of Delaware. And so I was heavily involved in a lot of these insurance companies and how they work to make sure that things are not covered, that they're not a covered claim. And I would say it's a very gray area as of right now, but I think it'll be a bit more black and white once the lobbying is done. Because at the end of the day, financially, insurance companies cannot handle it on the large scale that it would be, because you're talking about the possibility of mass casualties, not even casualties, but illnesses, unemployment claims, all that stuff. There's a lot at stake, and the insurance companies always win.
Right.
They really do. It's a shame.
So without holding you to this, but I still want to ask the question. If you had to guess, will we have an uninterrupted college football season this fall or not?
Yes.
You think so?
Yes. On
time? Or maybe not starting on time or a month?
Yeah, I think a month or two over under. But we
are going to have a college football season.
When you read, the athletic directors coming out and saying we don't have contingency plans for there not being a college football season because it's so financially, it's not even something they can financially fathom. Right. Yeah, yes, there will be a college football season
without fans.
I don't know. I saw Ohio State was like, we could fit half these people, and it was like 14,000 people could fit in the stadium at 6 feet apart.
Wow.
Something like that.
That number got higher as the day went on.
Right, exactly. Because it's about it's like 2.5, it's like 2.75 million per game that they miss out just on concessions.
Right. Yeah, they started, that 14,000 number was how the day started. By the end of the day, they were up to, we could make it work with 50,000. Because I think they were starting to be like, well, families could sit together and then we'd have an empty seat.
Exactly.
And then families
How
together.
can we make more money? And that's it's like, they don't realize that they're just not calling a spade,
Right.
It's a money making business. And when you have these athletic departments in these schools firing or furloughing people, meanwhile, they receive how much money in federal funding? It's a real shame.
It's a shame.
It's against the law, but
and actually,
turns out
as we've been on here, I just got another alert that they're only going to test symptomatic players. So now you could have an asymptomatic athlete that potentially
what a mess
causes the entire team to contract it, but if none of them are showing symptoms, they're not going to test them.
Right. But as long as they have that policy written and the insurance approved for it, they're good. You know what I mean? Like, that's what they're doing. They're setting themselves up for all the reward and, very little risk.
Yeah, about a $4 billion reward.
Right.
On the other side of it. So
that'd be nice. I'd like that.
Oh man.
So we appreciate the time so far. I got a couple more questions.
Yeah, right.
I ask every guest that we have, what was your, I was listening to you tell your backstory. You have a bunch of experience in a few different backgrounds. You said you were coached and you practiced law on different levels. But where was that moment that you failed? Because everybody's got this point where something didn't go their way. That particular moment wasn't your best moment, but it sprung you toward something more positive. So I call it a fail up moment. So where was your fail up moment in your journey?
I've had a few, but I will say probably in the maybe after I moved to New York, after I left Blue Bloods, I left it for a great opportunity at an agency. And I don't think that I maybe overvalued my experience or my abilities.
Okay.
But, being in a different city, in a different world, I took risks. I started this branding PR. I had done stuff for some athletes and for some Broadway people and actors and actresses. And I knew all these people, but I wanted like a steady job to just pay the bills. And, I was going out and applying to like just something at the counter. I didn't want to work in the law full time then. Like I had done it. I didn't want to do it. So, I was getting rejected from, being the desk person at, Pure Bar or something like that. And like those moments, and, you're trying to pay bills. And, I took a lawyer's salary from Philadelphia and carried it into New York to work in production. So, that was fun. And it was a failure in that, like, it was just the lowest of lows, it was all those things, all those no's. The amount of time I've heard no, fill, I don't know, the entire ocean.
Right.
But all of those no's just made me continue to ask, because one of the times it was going to be yes. And so that's kind of what happened. I failed in the sense that I left security and I left something that I was good at, and I had a lot of people supporting me to go out and do something on my own. Didn't quite work out. I enjoyed it, but all those no's led to some pretty cool yeses.
Good deal. Yeah, I just find that to be a very interesting answer from a lot of different people, because most folks have had that moment or moments where it's just like, okay, this is it's not going the way I want it, but it's gonna turn me in a different direction. And the last one is just about your morning routine. What is it? What do you do to start your day, to get your day rolling, that you could share with us? Maybe someone could piggyback. Because I think, again, I'm somebody that just believes the way you start your day sort of sets the tone. And so I just like to get that point of view from our guests.
I admit I push snooze a few times. That's how I start my day. But, I get up, I have a cup of coffee, and I always go onto like Spotify, and I try to put on a song that like fits my mood for the day. I don't know if I want to be like pumped up or if I want some like mellow music, but just something that fits my mood for that day. And then I just get to work. I gotta wait for that coffee to kick in before
I got
someone tries to get an early morning phone call. I'm like, listen, okay, listen. Unless I'm getting coffee delivered to me, then it's gonna take a minute.
Gotcha.
But yeah, no, I need to be better. So I've been listening. So I'm learning from other people's morning routines and what they do.
Right.
A work in progress is what they say.
I got you.
I find your answer very relatable.
That's it's relatable.
Yeah, exactly. Got to have the coffee.
Everyday person. Yeah.
My last question: once we're on the other side of the pandemic, everything's safe and clear from medical professionals and not some of the other people saying it's safe. What are you most looking forward to doing?
Oh man, this summer in the city was going to be fun. We had the Liberty playing at Barclays. We had the Sky Blue FC playing at Red Bull. I was ready to go to some, women's sporting events and hang out with with my crew, the people in the media. They're just awesome. So I'm ready when that's back up and running. I'm ready to go.
Right.
Be the people around sports teams,
Right.
all around GMs to anybody. It's just fun. Being around sports is fun. So I'm ready to go back to Barclays and maybe hang out in 40-40 a little bit.
Well, I may not be ready. I'm just ready for youth sports because I got a killer 5th grade team that I am just chomping at the bit to get out here. So this has been killing me.
Do you play? Do you stand in front of them and just kind of?
Yeah, I play with them. I get out there.
You don't let them win.
No, I don't let them win, but I just push them, and it's really one of the more fulfilling things that I do in my life. So I'm really like on edge, just waiting for things to kick back up.
No, that's so fun. I used to coach AAU too, and it's. I coached college, which is athletes who are more cerebral.
Right.
But coaching the younger kids and really teaching them the fundamentals, the things that you don't see in some of these 20-year-old kids.
Right.
It's fun, because you're you remember your coaches and the people who taught you the right things versus the ones who didn't. So that's awesome.
Right. Absolutely.
Bravo to you for getting those kids out there in tip-top shape.
That's right. I can't wait.
What's the team name?
Garner Road. We're Garner Road 2027. So they'll graduate high school in a long way from now. But
go Garner Road. Let's go.
There we go.
Absolutely. Well, Kelsey, this has been awesome. We appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll get to have you back soon.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to Forward Thinking. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. You can also get more information at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. We'll see y'all next week.